So you've just been elected as a politician, right? Not necessarily a high level one. It doesn't have to be in the United States. It could be anywhere in the world. You've been elected as a politician, and it's your first day in, the chambers, the parliament, the Congress, wherever you are in the world, whatever country, you name it, right? And so you're moving into your office, but you start to notice within the building of, parliament or your government building respectively, that there's all these strange symbols. And you say to yourself, well, this probably has to do with just the history of the country, the culture of the country, and things like that. But you've never seen it or read about it or heard about it in the history books in school, right? And, you went to elementary school, high school, college, the whole 9 yards, metaphorically. You then start asking some of your political colleagues who've been there for a while, hey, what's going on with these symbols and things like that, right? No one really gives you an answer. So eventually you start pressing, and then people start giving you an answer, but kind of in a joking sense, saying, oh, they're here to control us if we ever get out of control or what have you. Then you think to yourself, these symbols are here to control us. In what sense, right? Now, before I go on, I just want to say that we do have a Patreon. It does help support the show. On top of that, I would also like to give a very special shout out to my friend Rika. Rika, thank you so much for watching the show. Now, there is a very quick announcement I want to make before we start today's episode, which is that starting this coming Friday, leading into the Wednesday of next week, I will not be in the studio. However, rest assured, I have pre-recorded just under 10 episodes. Between all of that, some of that's for the members, some of that's for the public, so rest assured it's going to feel like I haven't even left. Now, the only thing I will not be able to do are the Kraken episodes, just because Kraken are the news episodes which happen in real time, so I will be giving news updates for the members, but unfortunately, on a public level, I will not be able to do anything about that. So tomorrow will probably be the final day for a Kraken episode for about 5 or 6 days, and then we'll get back to normal. So let's jump right into it. The Iron Triangle. Energetically sanctioning soulless assets, in brackets, matrix agents / DARPA time travel. Now, first off, let's start off at a very fundamental level, okay, folks? What is the Iron Triangle? So first off, according to Wikipedia, in United States politics, the Iron Triangle comprises the policy-making relationship among the congressional committees, the bureaucracy and interest groups, as described in 1981 by Gordon Adams. Earlier mentions of this Iron Triangle concept are in a 1956 Congressional Quarterly Weekly Report as Iron Triangle, Clout, Background, and Outlook, and Chinks in the Iron Triangle. End quote. Now, notice something before we go on, folks. Notice that, ironically enough, I say ironically with air quotes, the United States and the West overall generally tends to have the most amount of symbols that align with that of the political infrastructure of that respective nation. Now, let's jump right into it. So first off, let's understand what signet identification is, or Cygnus X3. So first off, Cygnus X3 is a high-mass X-ray binary and microquasar with a compact star, either a neutron star or a black hole, and a companion star, most probably a Wolf Rayet, WN7 or 8, with huge mass loss and powerful stellar wind. It was first observed in 1966 and has been monitored across multiple frequencies, from radio, infrared, optical, X-ray to gamma rays and things like that. It has been identified as a source of ultra-high energy UHE gamma rays of an extremely energetic nature. Indeed, their initial discovery in the 1970s was responsible for a complete reassessment of particle acceleration in compact stars, end quote. Now, I'm just going to simplify this. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'm going to get right to it. It has been strongly argued on a secretive level that the Cygnus X3 actually keeps the timeline using Project Looking Glass in control of the human duration of the paths that will be taken. So let's take a look at this right here. The dark star and mass extinctions. The possible existence of a hidden planet orbiting the sun is quite often associated with catastrophe on planet Earth. Indeed, the popular consensus that Nibiru, a mythical planet as yet unaccounted for by scientists, is about to appear in our skies, may be intrinsically wrapped up with our common dread of cataclysm, in the same way that many incorrectly anticipated an apocalyptic event. Now, end quote. Long story short, Has the apocalypse happened? Yes, but in different timelines. So humans are using Project Looking Glass, as I've basically trying to establish for the past week or so on a public level, to curate mass consciousness. So I'm not going to spend any more time on that, in order to derive a timeline that allows humanity to survive at a mass level. Now, does that mean that certain human beings could die off? Sure. But in general, the elites and the ones in charge of us, the ones that really run things, that are taking orders from extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, you name it, they need the vast majority of the population to remain in order for us to stay so, I guess you could say, oblivious relative to the population, meaning that people like you and I, we know what's going on. We have a pretty good idea, right? But ultimately, there's a bunch of people out there that don't. And again, as the old saying goes, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they're being fooled, right? Because nobody wants to admit that they're being tricked, right? But again, so let's move on. Let's take a look right here. George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter, pre-identified by DARPA time travel. Now, this has to do with Andrew Basiago relating to Project Pegasus, but here's what's extremely interesting. They were able to predict through some of the documents and PDFs that I am showing right now who future presidents would be, but it was not fully an accurate or descriptive, I guess we could say, position that was going to be solidified within the timeline depending on the events that are occurring, because again, there are different nations and other extraterrestrial events that occur overall that actually have to do with the way in which timelines work. Now, you remember Project Carrot? We spoke about the different weapons or the different symbols and things like that trying to be reverse engineered. So I'm going to be putting up right now as I speak a picture for those on YouTube of a drone that is actually manned, and I've been putting this up on my Instagram story as a little bit of a hint. It's actually manned by humans, but the technology is alien. So a lot of people will say, how come these drones are seen more and more nowadays, especially with people having security cameras on their houses? They're seeing these drones of many different shapes, by the way, probing on a very low level, cars and little things in urban neighborhoods and suburban areas and things like that. And not necessarily in the city, but sometimes you see them there. The reason for this is because this actually comes from the Cygnus X3 star, or the dark star, if you will, which basically conforms to the control from an energetic sense of the way in which the iron triangle works. Now, we have to understand, going back to the example at the beginning of the way in which the political spectrum seems to appear with regards to certain, I guess we could say statues or structures, if you want to call it, being very strangely shaped, if you will. And the reason for this is because these shapes actually allow for these probes that are now seen more and more, these alien drones, but that are being controlled by humans, by the way. Keep that in mind, that the aliens have basically allowed us to reverse engineer, that keep the control and the surveillance on people in a way that we cannot even fathom. So using blockchain and quantum entanglement through the different ways that quantum processing can work, which quantum healing connects with that too, but that's a whole other thing, we can actually see that there is a form of surveillance occurring through the iron triangle. Now, here's what's interesting. Take a look here at I'm putting up a picture again of the iron triangle, of the way that the government works, right? We have the interest group in the bottom left corner, we have bureaucracy in the bottom right, and then we have Congress at the top part of the triangle, right? Okay, at the top point there. Now, that's the front end of the government. You ever think about the back end? You ever think about what would happen if you were to flip that triangle upside down, so to speak? What do you then have? You now have a shadow government on the front end controlling the public level of the government. So what do you have there when you take that triangle and you place it downwards in the opposite direction? You have a merkabah, right? And do you see how they put it right in front of our faces? That is the synthetic merkabah that is trying to create what is called a parallax view of the way in which politicians operate to control them, right? Now take a look at this right here. It is based on parallax, which offers a reliable method of deducing a star's distance from Earth. If an observer on Earth measures the star's position in the sky and then looks at it again months later, the star will appear to have moved slightly because it is being viewed from a different point in our planet's orbit around the sun. Knowing the dimension of Earth's orbit, astronomers can calculate the star's distance from the amount of its apparent movement, end quote. But what happens when the parallax view doesn't allow for that to happen? No matter where the orbit on the sun is, the distance is always relatively the same. And generally speaking, it's about 180 million light years away relative to other stars. Again, those that are members will know this. How do we know about the 180 number always being reoccurring here? We're seeing it filter down. Now let's take a look at this right here. Organic portals and soulless humans. So let's take a look. Many people are not aware of the path that the world is currently going into. So first off, the cosmos is full of life-giving and slaying, forgiveness and vengeance, exaltation and abasement, guidance and deception, to attempt to assume God's point of view and mix everything at this level results in only staying at this level. Now, take a look at this. Matrix agents. I will be paraphrasing from published sources listed in the footnotes and will include personal observations from friends and myself. We're talking about the definition of souled human and organic portals. So organic portals comprise approximately half of the human population. The other half mostly consists of souled humans. Here we define soul and the word and the concept soul as the core of individualized consciousness that remains intact between successive incarnations. Now, this is what's interesting, end quote. So what we're seeing here, folks, is a massive form of suppression, and I'll explain how. Sorry, I just had to take a sip of water there. Okay, so these symbols that we're seeing within different military bases, within different political establishments all around the world and things like that, those symbols are there to control the people whose souls have been reincarnated. Now, how can a soul be reincarnated, right? The concept here is this: if you are not awakened by the time your physical body passes, and you might be saying, Dave, what do you mean by awakened? Well, awakened to the extent in which your self-realization realizes that your soul, your body, the energy that you're comprised of is actually reincarnating through the synthetic merkabah that is the iron triangle. What ends up happening is your physical body dies and your soul kind of resets, which is why sometimes people forget from their previous lives about the Akashic records. But if you're watching or listening to this episode, you're on the right track, because clearly you've become more awakened in and of yourself, right? So what ends up happening is that the people that reincarnate are in theory the soulless humans. And as long as just about half of the current population relative to how many humans are living on Earth at a particular given time remains that way, folks, what ends up happening is that they can still control, through the symbols placed in different government buildings all around the world, through the synthetic merkabah, they can still control the different clones, the different abductions of children, the different secret, I guess we could say, pedophilia things going on that we talk about on Patreon. But again, I can't really get into that too much. But again, we see all of the different things happening here, and we see what's happening right in front of our eyes because of things like this. For example, this is militaryaerospace.com. Navy asks Raytheon to support Rother over the Horizon surveillance radar system to monitor drug smuggling. Rother stands for Over the Horizon Surveillance Radar System. Now, why is it that they asked Raytheon of all people? Why didn't they ask EG&G? Why didn't they ask, Battelle Corporation? Why didn't they ask the Rand Corporation? Because again, there's a very selective output placed in an energetic sense and also in an esoteric sense that we can argue in a lot of different ways are controlling us through that of, we can say, the Orion Dracos, the Archons, whatever you would like to call them, are overseeing the esoteric and energetic projection of what's happening here through things like Rother. Again, this is the combination, folks, of physical manifestations of technology, okay? And this is also the combination of also different energetic formations that seem to emerge itself as one and the same, that these gray aliens have been trying to warn us about for so long now, but nobody seems to even care at this point, let alone our military or our government leaders, right? So I want all of you to let me know what you think. What's basically happening here is they're taking soulless humans, all right, folks, and they're the ones that have not been awakened or enlightened by the time their physical body passes, and they're using the symbols within different government buildings to keep that control of suppression down. Because again, the people in theory elect the politicians that go in there, right? In pure theory. At the same time, what ends up happening is, what if the ones that you have elected are so down to earth in a metaphysical sense and not in a good way, in more of a three-dimensional sense, that they don't believe in things like being enlightened or awakened? You keep the suppression going all the way down, metaphorically, right from the top, not straight down, but in a slanted formation, so that when people begin to realize something, it's far too late. Next thing you know, the cycle restarts. You see what I'm saying here, folks? So let me know what you think, and we'll catch you a little bit later. Cheers.